On to the main event for the evening. So our panel tonight is talking about how we can support innovation, economic development, and entrepreneurship in rural places. We have three absolutely amazing panelists that I've been privileged to work with on and off over a couple of years. Each of the panelists will have 15 minutes to give a bit of an introduction to themselves, to their work, and how they see themselves in the themes of this evening. So I'm going to introduce them one by one. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Heather Hall. She's an assistant professor at the University of Waterloo. She's a friend of mine and an absolutely fantastic researcher. Among her many research interests, innovation and technology will be the focus of her talk this evening. Thank you, Sarah, and welcome everyone to the conference. When Sarah was first organizing this panel, she asked us to introduce ourselves, but not to focus on who we are, because that's in the program. Instead, she asked us to explain why we do the work we do and what we hope to achieve with it. I grew up in Northern Ontario. My father and my grandfather were both in the mining industry, and I witnessed at a pretty young age the strength and the volatility of the resource economy and the impacts this has on communities and the people who call these communities home. When I decided to pursue graduate school, I knew I wanted to focus on important policy issues facing Northern communities, but there was one particular moment that led to my focus on entrepreneurship and innovation. While visiting the University of Toronto, a student questioned why I was focusing on Northern Ontario for my research, because, and I quote, "Everything that matters is located along the 401. Probably the people who are familiar with what that means are laughing at the moment. For those of you who are not familiar with the 401, it's a major highway that starts in southwestern Ontario at the American border, passes through Toronto and ends at the Quebec border in southeastern Ontario. Essentially, it connects the urbanized part of Ontario that is among the fastest growing and most populous regions in the country. Basically, this student felt that rural and northern communities don't matter, especially when exploring topics of innovation or economic development. Unfortunately, they are not alone. This view is also supported by our academic and our policy literature. When we turn to this literature to try to find a better understanding of rural and northern regions, we're often told that they're unfavorable for the dynamic and innovative preconditions of the new economy. Rural and northern regions are usually ignored, and they're not often cited as case studies looking at entrepreneurship or innovation. I think this perception undermines the value of our rural and northern communities, and it's an actual disservice to the people and the entrepreneurs that do live and work in our rural regions. And this perception is something that I hope to change through my work on innovation. One of the key challenges of innovation research, especially in rural and northern regions, is a real lack of awareness of what innovation is. We all know we want it, but do we know it when we see it? 9 times out of 10, people often associate innovation with technology. Don't get me wrong, technology is extremely important, but innovation can happen in any firm, in any sector, in any place, and in all aspects of a firm's operations. It's also extremely important to recognize that most innovation is incremental in nature, meaning there are improvements or tweaks to existing products or processes. So think the latest changes to the iPhone. Less frequently, we see these radical or breakthrough innovations that can create new markets and industries while also eliminating or transforming others. But this is typically the innovation that we hear about. And this really impacts our perceptions about innovation, especially in our rural and northern communities. It's also important to recognize that innovation can be new to the world, but it can also be new to a particular place or a particular firm. So why is innovation important? Why do we all want it? Well, quite simply, it creates value. What that value is open to interpretation. It could be economic value, prosperity, jobs, wealth for an individual, for a firm, or perhaps it's social value, like advances in medicine or healthcare, poverty reduction, or maybe it's value for the environment to help mitigate the impacts of climate change or create greener ways of producing products. When we look at some of the key arguments that have emerged over the last 20 years in our innovation research, there's 2 key lessons that have emerged. The first lesson is that innovation is a social process, or simply put, firms do not innovate in isolation. It's messy, and it often involves interaction and learning between a wide variety of stakeholders, from entrepreneurs and industry associations to post-secondary institutions, including our colleges and our universities, to government agencies and civil society. As a result, the institutions and the infrastructure that support innovation play a really significant role, especially in our rural northern regions. And the second lesson is that geography or place matters. Firms and entrepreneurs become attached to particular places due to the place-based assets, or those unique things that exist in your community that can't be easily replicated elsewhere. These really have a direct impact on a region's competitive advantage. So unfortunately, as I mentioned in the beginning, much of the research on innovation and our policy attention is really focused on our large city regions. What we do know about innovation in rural and northern communities is that it typically occurs in our resource sectors, like mining, agriculture, forestry, fisheries, oil and gas. It also tends to be more incremental, often in response to a particular problem, either identified in-house by a customer, perhaps a supplier, and it's usually new to the firm or a particular region versus new to the world. So as part of my quest to help change that perception that rural and northern communities don't matter, here are a few of my favorite examples of innovation from across Canada. Our first example comes from Sudbury, and it's a company called May Manufacturing. In 1957, Leo May was a miner working underground at Inco, and at the time there were no lunchrooms for the miners to have their lunch and take a seat, so they would often sit on their tin lunch boxes and they would collapse due to their weight. Leo got to thinking he could probably work in his garage and come up with an affordable, lightweight lunchbox that could withstand the weight of a miner. By 1978, the company was incorporated, and he was mass producing lunchboxes for nearly all the miners at Inco and across Northern Ontario. Fast forward a few decades later, his daughter Catherine took over the company, and she introduced a more design-oriented lunchbox. The original was created to be tough, not pretty, but she wanted hers to be both. So she discovered an anodizing process where an electrical charge is applied to the metal, and it can produce designs and colors. Catherine appeared on Dragon's Den a few years ago to secure financing to expand the business, and in preparation for that appearance, she worked with a local college professor in entrepreneurship to help her with her pitch. He then also traveled to Toronto with her to help her with the negotiations. She's also never missed an opportunity to market her product. Sudbury has a bit of a growing film sector, and often when actors are in town, she would drive down to the sets and give them a lunchbox and explain the story. Often the actors would take a picture of themselves sitting on the lunchbox and put it on social media, and this would open up new markets for her products across the world. May is not alone in Sudbury. It's part of a larger mining supply and services innovation system that employs roughly 13,500 people working in over 300 companies, which generated nearly $4 billion in sales last year alone. These firms did not appear overnight. Their roots are in the 1970s, when the major mining companies started downsizing and outsourcing services and production due to a number of external economic forces, labor disputes, and new production technologies. By 1981, the major mining companies had cut approximately 10,000 jobs. But one positive result of this release of labor was that a number of these unemployed miners, armed now with tacit knowledge of the major mining companies, started to create small and medium-sized enterprises to serve the local mining industry. In addition to these companies, over the last few decades, we've seen the emergence of a number of mining innovation-related support institutions and infrastructure. This includes incubators and fabrication labs, which generate new entrepreneurial and innovative activities, research centers and programs at the college and university that provide training as well as technical and scientific knowledge, and a number of regional development programs that really support that innovation and entrepreneurship. My second example brings us to Fogo Island in Newfoundland and Labrador. For those of you who are not familiar with Fogo, it has a population of about 2,200 people, and its economic history is tied to the cod fishery, which collapsed in the 1990s. It is only accessible by ferry, boat, or charter plane or helicopter. And after the collapse of the cod fishery, the community really suffered. People, especially young people, were moving away, and there was little economic opportunity on the island, plus limited capacity. In 2006, Zita Cobb created the Shore Fast Foundation with her brothers. They grew up on Fogo Island, and she had gone away to work and became a finance executive in the tech industry. After doing quite well for herself, she decided that she wanted to help revitalize the island's economy and preserve its culture by making it an international destination for arts and tourism. So she started a social enterprise called the Surefast Foundation, and its approach to community revitalization originally focused on three key elements: Fogo Island arts, which is really designed to help promote artistic endeavors; the development of a geotourism industry with the construction of the Fogo Island Inn; and the development of a micro-lending program for entrepreneurs on the island to help establish and grow their own businesses. It's since expanded to include a number of other initiatives and partnerships. All of the textiles in the inn, from the blankets and the furniture, are all built locally and available for purchase. She has teamed local textile workers with international designers to produce innovative designs and ideas. And from the moment you walk in the inn, locals are part of the process, bringing people on tours and educating them about the history of the island. They are now producing economic nutrition labels to showcase how much is contributed back into the local community. These examples highlight the importance of bold thinking and taking risks, the importance of place and recognizing the assets that can be harnessed, including the landscape, and our most important asset, the people who call a particular place home, as well as the importance of interaction, learning, and our role as community and economic development professionals or people passionate about rural development in supporting innovation and entrepreneurship. Despite these positive stories, I'm not naive to the realities many rural and northern communities face across the country, that in some instances counteract innovation and economic development. Demographics, awareness, access to broadband, infrastructure, access to funding, and government policies that do little to encourage and support economic development in rural and northern regions can all counteract our efforts to promote innovation and entrepreneurship. On the flip side, there are a number of ways we can actually try to support innovation and entrepreneurship. And when we often talk about the policies and tools that are available, we can group them into 4 categories. The first are really general, so these are place neutral, things like tax incentives for research and development. Or they can be more specific or geared to a particular place or place space. Some examples of this are regional innovation strategies or smart specialization strategies, which are being used in the European Union. We have less experience in Canada with creating regional innovation policies, but I'm excited to report that Newfoundland and Labrador will be the first jurisdiction in North America to pilot smart specialization, so stay tuned for that. Innovation policies can also be systems-based, which means they're really focused on enhancing that interaction and learning between innovation stakeholders. And this can be done through things like business networks, association, various networking events. And oftentimes, a really key component of this is actually getting entrepreneurs out into the world so they can showcase their products and what they're doing at trade shows or other industry events. And finally, our innovation tools can be specific to the actor or the entrepreneurs themselves. This might include incubators, skills training, or something I really love, which is called reverse mentoring. And this takes youth, ideally in high school, and matches with them with the owner of an existing business in your community. The youth can then provide mentorship to that business on anything from creating a website or new technologies or social media or perhaps opening up new markets. At the same time, the youth gains knowledge about local businesses in their community and the important role they play. In my final few minutes here this evening, I just wanted to leave you with what I'm calling a public service announcement on disruptive innovation, because I think rural and northern regions will be impacted more by this technological tsunami that is in many ways already occurring. Automation, advances in technology, advanced robotics, platforms, artificial intelligence, they are all going to fundamentally reshape the future of life and work in Canada. As individuals interested in rural economic or community development, we need to start looking at how our sectors and our communities will be impacted. In some instances, it will create new opportunities. In others, it might require new skills, education, and training. And in the worst case scenario, we will see jobs completely disappear and sectors restructured. We need to start thinking about these trends now to try and mitigate the consequences and harness the opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. Next, I'd like to bring up Chart Vandenberg, who's an entrepreneur and president of Land Info Technologies. And what I'm really excited to hear more about and to share with you folks is using technology to solve problems in rural places. And from what I know of Chart's work, this is going to be an awesome presentation.
I have a funny name. Chart, like a map, or a pie chart. I think when my mother, a long time ago, almost 60 years ago, decided to give me the name Chart, she never thought I would be talking to these educated people in Nelson about maps. So I thank her for that. I also have a funny accent. I'm originally from South Africa, Dutch is not too far out, and been living in Canada for 20 years. I still struggling to shake the accent. I have an urban planning background, and I worked as an urban planner for municipalities, and later turned into consulting, doing consulting work, and specifically in information systems and geographic information systems that we'll talk about today. My passion is, lately, in the last 2-3 years, my passion was to help small communities to be better in what they do. And I've been fortunate to work with Selco College, and we have some research projects that we did together that I will share with you today. I would say tonight. But what I would like to talk about before we talk about the examples that I'll show you what we've developed is just share with you a few advantages in technology that I feel is crucial and beneficial and that's available, can be made available to smaller communities, and they can definitely benefit from. Before we talk about the technologies, maybe just define, I'm not sure whether everybody's familiar with the Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. But in essence, it is, I'm sure you're all familiar with Google Maps, and that's a good example of how GIS technology is used. Geographic Information Systems is actually an extension of the typical cartography or map makers. It's very similar to that process. And everybody starts with a base map, and then you add a layer to that map. That's what the map makers did. GIS is a bit more complicated because you can add as many layers as you want. And that's a big advantage. And also, it has unlimited number of layers and data that you can capture. And it also have a very good spatial analysis functionality. That's sort of what I make my living out of. And I'm working very closely with Selco College. I think Ian Parfit here in the room. We are sort of working closely on a number of projects there. A quick history about GIS. You will be proud to know, as Canadians, that the first GIS in the world was actually developed in Ottawa in 1960. And it was developed to map land use. And since the 70s and 80s, it was really more the academic research projects, and nothing really happened. But in the 1990s, a lot of software, commercial software appeared. And one of them is actually, you might know, for those who are more technical, something called ISRN, that is really today, I would say, the major market player there. What happened with, if you look at the GIS software and the whole implementation of a GIS system, one of the key things there is that, or I would say problems, is that it's very expensive to do. It's expensive and you need a fair amount of expertise. And what we find is that in smaller communities, they just did not implement geographic information systems. It was developed in larger cities because they had the expertise, and they also had, obviously, the financial funding for it. But recently, this has changed, and that's what we're talking about today, is there were substantial economic or technology, advances in technology that make it possible for smaller communities to use this technology. The first one is internet, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the benefits of the internet. You have information at the push of a button on the device of your choice. But from a GIS perspective, why it's important and what the benefit we have from the internet is that there are a number of spatial information or layers available now to us. And I don't have to tell you, everybody's using Google Maps, Bing Maps, Street View, all those kind of things. But more than just having that available on your cell phone, what is now available to us as well is we can access certain layers of the GIS and display it on our own custom GIS system. And I'll tell you a bit more about that later and show you an example of how we did that. But traditionally, to implement a GIS system is quite expensive. And this is definitely a major advantage and a benefit that's now available to us. The second advantage that I would like to share with you is GPS, or Global Positioning Systems. If you're using a global positioning system all the time, you might be aware of it. But basically, what it is a number of satellites that orbits the Earth. And the satellite sends out information about the exact location to a receiver, on the Earth, and we can figure out exactly where we are. We use this all the time. What the bit of history about GIS, GPS, Geographic Global Positioning System, is that it was again developed in the 1960s by the US Navy. And they had about, I think, 5 satellites, and they used it to navigate their ships. It was also used a lot in the Gulf War at the time. But one of the problems we had was the information that was available to the public was scrambled, and it was not accurate, so it was not very useful. But what happened in 1st of May 2000, Bill Clinton, the then President of the United States, declared or announced that they would switch off scrambling, or they call it selective availability of these satellites. And then suddenly, all this information, this accurate information, was then available to the public who really wants to know. And that was a major thing that's available, and a lot of the development that took place today is based on that. The next component or advance that I would like to share with you is open data. Now, if we look at, I think there was in The Economist there in May this year, there was a article, you might have seen it, saying that the most valuable resource in the world is not oil anymore, but data. And if you look at the top 5 technology companies, Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft, they are the wealthiest companies in the world. And believe it or not, according to this article, their net profit for the first quarter in 2017, this year, was $25 billion net profit. So this is amazing growth in that technology. Now, open data, although data is undervalued, but open data is a trend that now started and is much more popular. Previously, people had to purchase this information, but the whole trend towards open data is now much more popular. What it basically means is the idea that data can be made available to the public, to the community, free no strings attached, no copyright. And that was a major issue because data is quite expensive. And I'm glad to say that the government now, federal and on provincial level and on municipal level, have adapted this model. So there again is a tremendous benefit to everybody, specifically to smaller communities that do not have the capacity to capture data, that they can use that. Lastly, in terms of an example, is open source data, or open source, not data, open source software, I'm sorry. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. Basically, what is important is that software is specifically the source code, as we call it, is available to the public or to the community to develop and use for free. And that's maybe the important thing to us. The data is for free. Basically, it is software developed by the community for the community. And we are very much involved in that as well with Selkirk College. So if we look at those four components, the internet, GPS, and open data, and then open source software, we use those technology and we developed a number of projects. I just want to share with you two of them that we developed with Selkirk College. The one was a GPS system that we use. Now, the need for this was for smaller municipalities, a public works person. What they have at the moment, they've got a hard copy map that's maybe against the wall or in a truck. It's torn apart, it's outdated, there's some scratching on it, and that is where they know where the pipes and hydrants and manholes are. What we wanted to do is replace that. And we did this with using this particular gadget, if you want. But we use the software what you see there is a Windows application, so Windows tablet. And on the right-hand side there, you see a little silver square gadget that's plugged in there in the USB port. That is a GPS receiver. So that GPS receiver is about $40, and we get an accuracy level of that of say 1.5 meters round about that. And the software that we use for this were all open source. So basically, what we had is this is just a screenshot of the actual screen, a very easy to use software application using open source software, so no cost, using a GPS system, $40, with a Windows, in this case it's a Windows application, which hopefully they usually have already, and that is used for this particular application. The next one I can share with you is a web mapping application. Again, the need for that was people in a municipality wanted to view their data in an easy way. And this is typically used for someone at a counter, the front counter, and they would then specifically go and if someone would call the front counter, it's an easy way for them to access the data. But what is important here is we managed to get, remember I talked about the web mapping service? This data was actually generated from web mapping services. So what we did here is we actually captured this data. We didn't capture much of the data. The only data that we captured was if I zoom in here, the actual infrastructure in this case. But if I would go left here, the orthophoto, the base map, the street map, that was all coming from different sources. So what is important here is we can now, as a small community at a very low cost, generate something that was not even possible a few years ago because of the cost. Here's another example. So here, for instance, just an example here is on the right, here's a hydrant and on a similar web mapping application, and there's a street view. So we integrate street view, and this is, you see there's a hydrant there, and there's a hydrant there. So all of this data is now available, really, in this case, free or at a minimal cost to the community. Okay, so I'm almost done. Before I say merci, I thought I'll do a quick thing here using open source, put my money where my mouth is. And I did a map. Let's just do this map here. And while I took all data that you see here comes from an open source data from the government. Basically, I took the population growth for the last 10 years, and I did what we call a heat map. And all the red dots show where the growth in population was in the last 10 years. So as you can see, there's not much happening here, but a lot of growth in Calgary. You know, you can go through this in this area. And what I'm showing this to you because I think this is a very good example of how to do, maybe also explain what the problem is. Yes, I'm just going to go to the East Coast. Here is a lot of development, but just the interesting thing here, Halifax, for instance, this is all white, so there's got a negative growth. So that is another example of how we could use the data. So as far as I'm concerned, it is a low fruit, hanging fruit for you guys to make use of in whatever application you have, whether it's tourism, economic development. And I believe that when we get together here again in 10 years or 5 years from time, we can do a similar map like this. And there will be hopefully many more red dots on this map where the growth will take place. And I hope we will all put small communities on the map again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our third panelist for this evening is Terry Van Horn. Terry holds a unique position being an economic development officer for an entire region as opposed to a single community. And she works with the Lower Columbia Initiatives Corporation, and she's here to talk about some of the exciting work that they are doing there.
I don't think I could have asked for a better introduction in the sense of having both Heather and Chart talking about, you know, rural innovation and entrepreneurship and then to our region, because that's exactly what we're trying to do at the Lower Columbia Initiatives. So I want to say thank you to Sarah and Selkirk College for having me here today with some of these distinguished speakers. I feel very honored to be sharing the stage with you. Thank you to all of you for sharing your evening tonight to be here, and hopefully you get to have an opportunity to attend some of the sessions for the rest of the week. And of course, thank you, sir, for having faith and belief in a small rural community like our West Coonies and Selkirk College and having the forum here this year. Having said that, for those of you who don't know me, as Sarah had mentioned, my name is Terry Van Horn. I'm the Executive Director of the Lower Columbia Initiatives Corporation. As Sarah had mentioned, we are a Regional Economic Development Office, and it does sound a lot sexier to be from a community of 20,000 people than a community of 5,000 people. And so with the local municipalities of Rossland, Trail, Warfield, Montrose, Fruitvale, and Kootenay Boundary Regional Districts Area and B, A and B, we all put our resources together to create a regional focus and a regional position. Our organization is unique in the sense that it is part of a bigger organization called the Lower Columbia Community Development Team Society, which is a mouthful. But for those of you who are from the area, the LCCDTS has been around for quite some time, and it's all based out of volunteers trying to drive economic development and realize that they needed to have a function like the LCIC to move forward initiatives. The interesting part about the LCIC, it took us a few years to get our feet on the ground, but the beautiful part is that we are very, very strategic and we are very aligned in our strategies all around business retention, expansion, and attraction. That's our focus. The LCCDT, of course, has a bigger mandate all around social economic development, food security, agriculture, tourism, the bigger gamut of economic development. But the LCIC is specifically focused on the business retention and expansion. So, to the big part. I'm here to talk about metaltechalley. Metaltechalley is a very new initiative. It might be new in the rollout since May, but it's been 4 years in the making. It's a tangible initiative out of exactly what Heather was talking about: clustering your assets, pooling your resources, diversifying your economy. All of those economic development words and initiatives you hear about, this is actually putting it into action. So we came up with an economic development marketing strategy, and it's an interesting story because very quickly in my job, when I first started at the LCIC, I would go outside of the region and I'd go to the urban centers and start talking about the trail area, the West Kootenays. Okay, let's get a little bit closer, maybe Kelowna. Pretty soon it was the bottom right-hand corner of the province because nobody knows where we are and what we're doing out here. And I very quickly, when I started talking about the region, affordability, Heather mentioned that again, a beautiful work-life balance and a beautiful economy, our beautiful lifestyle. I mean, come on, everybody's saying that in British Columbia. It's very obvious that we all have those. Outside of the urban centers, we're all affordable. We all look attractive. I realized we needed to start telling a different story and fast if we wanted to be heard. And so we started 4 years ago. We started clustering our assets, having stakeholder engagement sessions, getting a consultant in and saying, okay, we need to find out what makes us different, what gives us a sense of place, what makes us stand out. And very quickly we realized we have some incredible assets in our region. And again, by being a regional function, and when I talk about region, yes, I serve the trail area, but honestly, outside of the urban centers, I really serve the West Kootenays and really all of the Kootenays when I'm going out and speaking about our assets. So coming up with a different story that's exciting and leading edge, we came up with metaltechalley. It all started with a piece of dirt. We knew we had these industrial lands. We have some of the most affordable serviced industrial lands in the province, and we wanted to come up with a strategy of how can we attract some new investors, some new visitors, some new entrepreneurs to consider relocating, bringing their business, satellite business, the whole thing to our area. And so we came up with this marketing strategy called metaltechalley. There's 3 focuses to the metaltechalley. We talked about our expertise. For those of you who don't know about trail, it has the world's largest integrated lead zinc smelter. We have an incredible expertise in the metallurgical and advanced materials sector. We also have excellent expertise in recycling and the circular economy and technology and innovation. Like a lot of small communities, rural communities, we all have these little hubs of amazing technology that's going on, and our areas really worked hard to get a handle on what these technology companies are doing, where are they, and how we can support them. So the interesting part about all of the stakeholder engagement and all of this clustering of our assets, we actually found a new asset. We have an incredible supply chain of service companies that actually support all this really great work that's going on in our community with the companies. So we have an urban style service center. We have companies like AMEC and Hatch Engineering and big satellite global companies that have satellite offices in our area. And that alone gives us a global reach that makes us stand out. And so it was a beautiful addition to our focus to have the supply chain that we can use to support the existing companies and hopefully the new companies. So the first target was the metallurgical sector. As I mentioned, Teck Metals is located in our region, and it actually deals with at least 2/3 or 3/4 of the periodic table every single day. The expertise in the metallurgical and advanced materials is second to none in the world. Let's celebrate that. Let's embrace that. Let's use that expertise and start doing some research on some of the new products and potential opportunities that sit in that facility every day. And with the beautiful hard work of the Kootenai Associations for Science and Technology, they actually created a new fabrication lab called Midas, and I can give you the long spiel, but for those of you who haven't signed up for a tour, you might want to join this tour on Saturday, because we will get to tour the Midas facility, but it's a metallurgical industrial development acceleration and studies facility all around the metallurgical sector. It's a fab lab as well as a study prototyping facility. We want to take these byproducts that are getting used at tech every day and start commercializing them, start coming up with new business ideas, new business opportunities, and attract the people who want to do research and innovation and start small companies. This is a perfect opportunity to use some of those byproducts of the tech. So that's the metallurgical sector that's a target. Our second target is industrial recycling. The unique thing about our area, we want to do all of this diversification in a sustainable way. And the beauty is that we have the world's only lithium-ion battery recycling company. The only one in the world. That makes us stand out. Why are we not talking about this? So we started to say, okay, people, hello. We're the only one in the world, hello. And with all of the, the new awareness on electric vehicles, this is a huge opportunity for business opportunity. So let's start celebrating, let's start telling this story. We also actually have Western Canada's largest industrial recycling for lead acid batteries and glass. There is some incredible technology that's already getting used in our region. We just need to tell that story. We need to share that and attract like-minded people in our area. And then, of course, industrial Internet of Things, big data and technology. Love to have Brian Fry here. He's our partner in crime at the I4C Innovation Center. We just have a brand new innovation center that's opened up in Trail all around industrial IoT, big data and technology. Brian and his partner are leaders. They are leaders in big data and technology. And in fact, they were leaders in cloud computing, and they're bringing their talent and their global reach when they're out and their expertise to our region to help expand businesses and lead the next fourth industrial revolution. And you talk about using technology, Chart, and making sure that we are technology savvy. That's what the I4C Innovation Center, and that's what Midas is doing, helping our local businesses become technology leaders as well. So we have these incredible sectors and these incredible expertise already there. Let's start sharing it and being able to attract like-minded people. This is kind of a summary of LCIC. I'm sorry. This is not an overnight plan. I get that. This is a big vision. This is a vision for 10 and 15 years. When you come back, Chart, and you see that red dot, and ours will be glowing big and bright. As big as bright for us. And so technology is absolutely the way to increase. It's the great equalizer. Everybody's going to be able to work from wherever they want. So why not here? Why not in metaltechalley? And that's our goal. And that's where we hope to be in the next 10 years when you see that red dot. So thank you for having me. And for any of you who want to contact me, I have left cards at the top. I'd love to talk more if anybody's interested about the actual strategy itself in terms of the nitty-gritty, because a lot of times that gets lost. And people go, how did you get there? And it was not an easy process. And it took a lot of collaboration and a lot of stakeholder engagement and a lot of partnerships. I just want to take this time to thank our supporters for this project. It's been an incredible journey, from the Columbia Basin Trust to the Rural Dividend Fund of the province, to our private partners like Tech and Selkirk College, and as well as I4C Innovation Center. It's been an incredible journey, and hopefully it's already been a success, so we're very excited.